The dining room in the Morgan family's sprawling North Carolina estate had never felt so eerily still. The usual hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, the forced cheer that typically coated our holiday gatherings like a too-sweet glaze gone. My father, Charles Morgan, whose voice normally commanded every room like a drill sergeant, with a gavel now cracked and wavered through the speakerphone, bouncing off the linen-draped silence like a ghost. The food never came, he said more to himself than anyone else, bewildered. Around the massive oak dining table, its polished surface now reflecting the muted horror on every face, 20 relatives sat in stunned disarray. No appetizers, no entrees, just meticulously folded napkins and empty china plates that looked like mocking placeholders. At the center of it all was a golden cornucopia centerpiece, my mother's pride and joy gleaming under the chandelier like some twisted symbol of a celebration that had been built on nothing but appearances. Across the room, Aunt Susan's eyes flicked nervously from person to person. I could imagine the moment that realization struck her, the slow unfurling of understanding blooming like a storm behind her composed face. Meanwhile, I was 300 meters away, tucked into my cozy apartment in downtown Asheville, perched casually against my kitchen island, with a warm mug of apple cider cradled in my hands. I could hear every tremor in my father's breath. "Oh," I said with smooth detachment, taking a deliberate sip. "I assumed you didn't need anything from me." Silence. Not just quiet, but an echoing, vacuum-like stillness that practically roared through the phone line. Then the first murmurs broke like cracking ice. Through the muffled receiver, I heard my mother, Debbie Morgan, her voice tight with alarm. "What does she mean by that?" she asked, barely above a whisper, as if saying it too loud would make it real. Her confusion wasn't just from the missing meal. It was the unraveling of the illusion the moment the curtain dropped. They hadn't wanted me at the table, but they'd had no problem cashing in the catering bill I had paid weeks in advance without even so much as a thank you. "My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 38, the eldest child, and in this family that meant being the unofficial coordinator, unpaid therapist, and bank account with legs." Thanksgiving in the Morgan family had never been about closeness or tradition, not really. It was more of a well-rehearsed performance, glossy Instagram stories, overcooked sentimentality, and a carefully curated version of unity. Underneath it all was favoritism, manipulation, and a quiet battle for control that no one dared to name out loud. Growing up in Raleigh, I was never treated like a kid, more like a junior employee. I handled school pickups, organized bake sales, fixed tantrums, and later helped with taxes and mortgages I didn't own. My younger siblings, Lindsay and Luke, were the golden ones. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the one no one thanked. When I finally left for college, I naively believed that would earn me a spot at the adult table, figuratively and literally. But old patterns cling harder than mildew. That belief shattered a week before Thanksgiving in 2024. Aunt Susan had dropped a cheerful message in the family group chat. "Can't wait to see everyone I ever," the polite one replied quickly. "Same here. Looking forward to it." No one responded. Then hours later, my cousin Tyler texted me privately. "Wait, are you seriously coming? Your parents told everyone you weren't invited this year." My stomach dropped like a stone. I stared at the screen, disbelief settling over me like fog. I called my mother, needing clarity, and she danced around the topic like it was a landmine. Eventually, she admitted, "We're keeping it small this year. Just immediate family." "I am immediate family," I said, my voice tightening my throat, burning with the effort not to scream. "Well, we just thought it would be easier." "Less tension," she added. Tension. There hadn't been any unless you counted me finally saying no when they asked me to cover Luke's car repairs, or when I refused to co-sign another loan for Lindsay's wedding aftermath. That's all it took, drawing one boundary. I checked. Everyone else had been invited. My siblings, their spouses, even second cousins I hadn't seen in years. Just not me. Fine, I thought. I may have been excluded from their table, but they were still feasting on my dime. It wasn't until a few hours later that the full scope of what had happened hit me like a slow-burning fuse. My dad had called weeks earlier, asking if I could chip in for Thanksgiving. But I hadn't just chipped in, I had footed the entire bill. The turkey, the maple-glazed ham, the artisan's sourdough stuffing. I'd placed every order myself, from Oak Hill Butchery Mom's favorite, and Sugar Hollow Sweets, the upscale bakery where she insisted the pumpkin cheesecake could win awards. Every invoice, every confirmation had been filed under my name. They didn't just forget me, they used me. With a steady hand and a quiet fury I didn't know I had, I made 2 phone calls. The butcher refunded me without question. The bakery hesitated, but when I forwarded the receipt and explained the situation, they relented. Orders canceled, refunds processed. Then I waited. On Thanksgiving Day at exactly 12:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Dad's name. I let it ring 4 times, just enough to unsettle him, then answered. The food never came, he said, voice-frazzled confusion crackling like static behind him. I could hear the buzz of chaos, the sharp edge of my mom's voice, the rising pitch of relatives trying to improvise. I tilted my head, smiled faintly. Oh. Maybe check with whoever placed the order. You placed the order? He snapped, voice rising. Did I? I let that silence stretch, like pulled taffy. Well, I didn't think you needed anything from me. An hour later, Tyler texted me the full play-by-play, no turkey, no pie, every grocery store within 50 miles either closed or ransacked. Lindsay's new boyfriend had been left unimpressed, prompting tears and a slammed door. Mom locked herself in the bathroom. Uncle Frank asked loudly, Didn't Rachel say she was handling the turkey? The room went silent. Then came the whispers. 3 days later, a group text from Mom. We really missed you this Thanksgiving. Hope we can put this behind us. Not a real apology, just a rug, a place to sweep it all under. I stayed quiet. Aunt Susan called the next day, her voice low. A lot of us confronted your parents. They needed to hear it. But Debbie Morgan didn't do consequences. Sure enough, within days, a new version of the story emerged. I wasn't hurt. I was unstable. I didn't react. I overreacted. I hadn't been wronged. I had sabotaged Thanksgiving. Dad called twice before I picked up. I don't know what you were trying to prove, he said, his tone tight with restrained anger. But you humiliated your mother. I laughed sharp and dry. Funny. I thought she didn't even want me there. He sighed, long, performative. We made a mistake, okay, but what you did, that was low. Lower than excluding your own daughter after she paid for the meal. You're being dramatic. It was a dagger. That word. Dismissive. Designed to shrink me. My voice trembled as my pulse pounded in my ears. If it wasn't a big deal, I snapped, Why are you still calling me about it, Dad? I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. My whole body buzzed rage, grief, betrayal, tangled into a storm I couldn't calm. That night, Tyler texted you, officially started a war. Apparently, Mom had wasted no time spinning her version of things, how I'd always been difficult, how this just proved it. Christmas loomed like a cold shadow, and I had no plans to go. It wasn't until Aunt Susan's name lit up my phone that I realized the story was mutating again, this time faster, more maliciously. Her voice, usually firm but motherly, came across the line like a whisper hiding from a storm. Rachel, she said gently, as if bracing me for something that would bruise your mom's telling people you're fragile, that you're skipping Christmas because you can't handle conflict. And your dad. He's playing the peacekeeper. Telling folks he tried to fix things, but you're being stubborn. I felt my grip on the phone tighten, the edges of my knuckles whitening, as though the pressure alone could squeeze out the rising fury. So this was the angle now, paint me as too delicate to show up, too emotionally frail, to face the family I had fed, paid for, and been discarded by. A scapegoat wrapped in festive ribbon. No, they weren't going to rewrite my story, not again. On Christmas Eve, I waited until the sun had dipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the sky blushed with twilight, before sliding into my car. The air in Asheville was crisp, laced with the sharpness of pine and the metallic chill of winter, a scent that clung to my scarf as I wrapped it tightly around my neck. I arrived fashionably late, deliberate, theatrical, in the quiet way only I would appreciate, and parked at the far end of the drive. The Morgan house, decked in twinkling lights and perfectly trimmed hedges, stood like a portrait of the holiday spirit, glossy and soulless. The moment I stepped inside, it was as if someone had yanked the needle across the record of their choreographed merriment. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, wine glasses froze in midair, and attention, sharp as a paper cut, sliced through the air. My mother's carefully Botoxed expression locked into place, her eyes wide and unreadable. My father, halfway through a sip of his bourbon, paused as if he'd just seen a ghost walk through his door. And Lindsay, my golden child sister, blinked rapidly like her contact lens had suddenly turned on her. Hey, I said lightly, peeling off my gloves and scarf with a smile that could frost windows. Merry Christmas. Oh, my mother finally managed. You made it. Of course, I replied sweetly, stepping further into the foyer. Wouldn't miss it for the world. And then, like a magician pulling back the final curtain, I stepped aside to reveal my guest. Margaret Bell, my grandmother, my mother's mother, elegant, despite her frail frame, stood bundled in a powder blue coat and silver scarf, eyes alight with mischief and anticipation. The blood drained from Debbie Morgan's face so fast it was like watching cream spill into coffee. Years ago, they'd had a falling out so venomous it splintered our family tree. My mother had cut her out with surgical precision, erased her from photographs and phone calls alike. But I never let her go. Goodness, Grandma said with mock wonder, surveying the grand foyer with wide eyes. It's been, 10 years, and everything still smells like lemon polish and control. Her smile was sweet enough to rot teeth. Dinner was a high-wire act of politeness. Every clink of cutlery was a veiled threat. My grandmother, bless her audacity, examined the stuffing like a food critic. She said brightly. Is this store-bought so consistent? Almost aggressively uniform. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted iron. Within a week, the backlash began. Stray texts came in from cousins, some masked as concern, others less subtle. Heard there was a misunderstanding. Didn't think you had it in you to be that cruel. Aunt Susan called again, her voice tired. Your mother's telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown. That what you did at Christmas proved it. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh that startled even me. How typical. My mother, Debbie Morgan, master of facades, was never more dangerous than when she felt exposed. Truth I'd learned was anathema to her, and if she couldn't bury it, she'd discredit the one who dared speak it. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was threatened. I called Grandma, craving something solid amid the gaslight haze. Her voice was warm, familiar, as sturdy as her old wooden spoon. Unfortunately, she sighed, your mother's been calling around saying she's worried about you. That you're not well. I snorted, the sound devoid of humor. You know that's not true, right? Sweetheart, she said, her voice suddenly steely. I knew it wasn't true before she even opened her mouth. That night, I sat curled under a throw blanket, the soft glow of the Christmas tree casting shadows on the walls, and typed a message to the family group chat. Hey everyone, just wanted to clear up some confusion. I'm doing great. No breakdowns, no drama. It's been an interesting holiday season, but I'm genuinely in a good place. Hope you all are too. Wishing everyone a happy new year. Short, neutral, impossible to twist. It was the digital equivalent of waving politely while the fire behind me turned my mother's lies into ash. Then something unexpected. Luke, my brother, sent a text. Hey, can we talk? We hadn't spoken in months. My heart pounded as I called him immediately. His voice was hesitant, softer than I remembered, carrying the weight of someone standing on uncertain ground. Look, he said, I don't agree with what Mom did. I blinked. You don't... She's really good at twisting things, he admitted. Thanksgiving felt wrong. But Christmas. That's when it all made sense. I let him talk, the words spilling like dammed water. I didn't say anything before because, well, you know how she gets. Yeah, I said softly, I know. I'm not saying I handled it well, but I don't think you're crazy. Not even close. The tears came before I could stop them. Silent, hot, necessary. I hadn't realized how desperately I'd needed to hear those words, how much they mattered coming from him. First Susan, then Grandma, now Luke. Debbie Morgan's grip was loosening. 2 weeks passed in a blur of returned calls and cleared calendars. Then my phone rang again. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something, curiosity, closure, maybe both, compelled me to answer. Her voice was ice. We need to talk, in person. About what? A pause heavy with meaning. Your little stunt humiliated me. There it was. Not hurt, not betrayed, just humiliated. Still clinging to appearance like a life raft. Sunday dinner, 6. Your father and I expect you. She hung up before I could respond. I almost didn't go, but Aunt Susan called. Just hear them out, she said gently. You don't have to forgive. Just make them say it to your face. And so I went. The Morgan house was colder that evening. Or maybe I just felt it more. The moment I stepped into the dining room, the air thickened heavy with unsaid things. My father stood near the end of the table, hands clasped too tightly, his mouth a thin line. My mother perched like a judge on her throne, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, lips set. Lindsay stared at her phone, pretending the room didn't exist. Luke sat at the edge, eyes darting nervously. Debbie exhaled hard. Do you have any idea what you've done? I tilted my head, letting the calm wrap around me like armor. Which part are you mad about, canceling the turkey, bringing Grandma to Christmas? Or maybe that people stopped believing your version of the story? You're so dramatic, she spat. Charles stepped in, voice low and rigid. Your mother's hurt. You've made her look bad. She made herself look bad, I said, my voice smooth but unshakable. I just stopped hiding it. My mother's cheeks flushed. The truth, she sneered. You mean your version of it? Because in mine, you abandoned your family, refused to move on, and took petty revenge over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. The word cracked in the air like a whip. You didn't invite me. You let me pay for the meal and then erased me like I was disposable. We didn't mean to exclude you, she snapped. We just thought it would be easier. Less tension. And then you made it worse. You told people I was unstable, I said, the heat finally rising in my chest. You tried to destroy my credibility. You embarrassed me, she shot back, in front of everyone. Then Luke's voice cut through, soft but solid. Mom, he said, you did exclude her. You told everyone she wasn't coming. You let her pay for everything. That was wrong. Her head whipped toward him, eyes blazing. Don't you start too? But Luke didn't flinch. You always cross the line when you feel cornered. And just like that, the cracks turned to fractures. Truth doesn't care for appearances. It only cares to be known. My father shifted where he stood, his posture faltering beneath the weight of something heavier than discomfort, guilt perhaps, or the long-delayed recognition of complicity. We should have handled it differently. He said, his voice strained and unsure, like a man trying to walk backward out of a burning room. My mother's gaze narrowed, her lips thinning into a straight line that cut across her face like a scar. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, sharp and cold, the kind of voice that had once silenced entire rooms. He hesitated, the pause, stretching, pulling every eye toward him. And then quietly he admitted, maybe she has a point. The room stopped breathing. I, however, had no intention of letting the moment pass without naming it for what it was. You didn't just leave me out, I said, each word deliberate like stones placed on a grave. You tried to convince the family that I was unstable. You told people I was having some kind of breakdown. Why, Mom? There was a pause, a flicker of movement in her eyes, as if the mask had slipped for just a second too long. And then the truth broke from her lips like a dam finally giving way, because I was embarrassed. The silence that followed was not empty, it was seismic. She blinked, stunned, as though even she hadn't realized the honesty of what she just said. I didn't know what to say when people asked, she murmured. It just snowballed. I didn't want to be the villain. So you made me the villain, I whispered, not in accusation, but in quiet revelation, the final puzzle piece clicking into place. She didn't answer, couldn't. And beside her, my father looked at her not like a husband offering support, or a man standing by his wife, but like someone seeing a stranger wear the face of the woman he thought he knew. Luke, stiff as marble, clenched his jaw so tightly I could see the muscle ticking. And across the table, Lindsay, silent, until now, exhaled sharply. Wow. She muttered a single syllable laden with dawning clarity and shame. In that breath, the illusion crumbled. The lies, the manipulation, the decades of selfish justifications, they didn't just fall away. They shattered, exposing the raw and ugly truth beneath. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother not as the force she had always pretended to be, not the carefully curated image, the untouchable matriarch, but simply a woman afraid to be wrong, so desperate to maintain control that she would burn her own child to keep the spotlight from dimming. I stood the scrape of my chair, loud and final. I'm done, I said, the words firm, measured, as steady as my heartbeat had finally become. Her mouth parted, but I was already ahead of her. I don't need an apology, not from you, because I genuinely don't believe you're capable of giving a real one. But I need you to understand that I'm done. She flinched like the truth itself had struck her across the face. Wait, no, you don't get to just walk away like that, she snapped, rising slightly from her seat. I'm not walking away, I replied, calm as ice. You did that first. You shut me out. And when people started noticing the empty space where I should have been, you rewrote the narrative. You made me the villain so you wouldn't have to be. Her lips moved, but no sound came out, just air, and the ghost of a defense she couldn't form fast enough. I turned to my father. I appreciate that you tried tonight, I do. But you let it happen. You let her tell that story. You let her call me unstable. And that hurt too. He didn't argue. He just stared down at his hands folded tightly like he was praying for the ground to open beneath him. My gaze swept across the room, landing on Lindsay. Her face was pale, her mascara slightly smudged, but her voice was soft and sincere. I should have said something sooner, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke nodded, his voice quiet but clear. Me too. It didn't fix anything, but in that moment, it mattered. In the weeks that followed, I created space not as punishment, but as protection. My mother's texts came in surface-level saccharine, the digital equivalent of forced small talk. Can we move past this? Let's start fresh. I read them, then left them unread. Aunt Susan, as always, checked in without fail, her voice a tether to sanity. Grandma Maggie sent a handwritten letter, warm and looping with affection, telling me how proud she was of me. You did what I never could, she wrote. You stood your ground. But the real surprise came weeks later in mid-January when a simple text from Luke appeared on my screen. Want to grab coffee? We met at a quiet cafe in West Asheville, the kind of place with exposed brick and soft jazz playing beneath the hum of espresso machines. We ended up sitting there for nearly 3 hours. I think I spent so long just trying to keep the peace, he confessed, hands wrapped around his mug like a lifeline. I didn't see how much damage she was doing. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I get it. And I did, because in that moment I realized something profound. I wasn't alone anymore. The rope I had been pulling against for years had finally started to fray, and others were beginning to see the tension too. If you've ever been the scapegoat, the one who sees the cracks while everyone else clings to the facade, you know that feeling. The hollow ache of being told you're the problem just because you dared to set a boundary. The quiet rage of hearing again and again, that never happened. You're too sensitive. Why do you make everything about you? Standing up to that kind of emotional gravity is terrifying. It's like defying the rules of physics. No one believes you until they feel the pull for themselves. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to forgive. It's to stop playing the part you were cast in without consent. To stop shrinking to fit at a table that never had a seat for you in the first place. That empty chair at next year's Thanksgiving. It won't be my shame, it'll be my peace. And if you're still reading this and nodding, if something inside you is cracking open, recognizing itself in my words, then maybe it's time to ask, which tables in your life are truly feeding you and which are just starving you for love you were never meant to earn? If you've ever been silenced, sidelined, or demonized for daring to stand your ground, I see you. I've been you. And I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and let it be a place where your truth lives unedited and unashamed. Support matters, community matters. Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. Choosing yourself, choosing respect, choosing truth even when it costs you family, especially then, is one of the bravest things you'll ever do. And if you found something of yourself in this journey, some strength, some solace, some spark, liking this video or subscribing to the channel helps keep stories like this alive. Rachel's chapter may be closing, but your story, yours, might be just beginning. And I'd be honored to walk that road with you.